Good morning, guys, and the people have spoken. I put it up to a poll because it's been about a month since my last Master Grade review, and this kit won. Welcome to my unboxing and review of the Master Grade Gundam TR-1 Hazel Custom. This is a 2017 P-Bandai release that I got for around $50, which is pretty reasonable as far as Master Grades go. That's around the same ballpark price as you would find kits like the Master Grade Jesta, the Master Grade Gym Sniper 2, the Master Grade Char's Gelgoog 2.0 in some places. And I feel like that's for good reason, because this kit is fairly basic as far as loadouts go. Of course, the gimmick behind the Advance of Zeta line is that you can buy a bunch of optional accessories and expansion parts for these kits to display these kits in a number of different configurations, of course. So my plan for the videos on these Master Grade AOZ kits, of course, I'm going to start with the actual mobile suits in development order. So I'm going to do the Hazel Custom, and then at some point in the future I'm going to do the Hazel 2 / Hazel Reserve Unit / Jim Quell Master Grade kit, and then the Advanced Hazel after that, and then after that a fourth video on all of the accessories. So I have 2 G-Parts Herdudu's, a Primrose, and the Shield Booster expansion set. So I'm going to show off all those accessories and then use them as well as the parts from the 3 Master Grades to piecemeal together a Master Grade Hazel Ausla, because, well, the last time it was up was part of a Gundam-based promotion, and that got bought out by scalpers nearly instantly. So the only real way for me to get one is either to buy one secondhand, which I'm not going to do, or to piecemeal it together using the kits that I have in my backlog, which I will do. So, getting into this kit's going to be fairly basic as far as setups go. I believe these Master Grade AOZ kits are going to be heavily based on the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0. This kit's going to be fairly basic as far as accessories go, pretty much only coming with sword board beam rifle with an extra shield booster you can mount either on the backpack there or have the kit using as a shield. So, getting right into it, of course, in very typical P-Bandai fashion, this box is not going to have much on it. This is just going to be in a monochrome navy blue. So, of course, pretty much nothing on the sides of the box. So, let's get right into it. Inside the box, we will get 7 bags of runners, which is pretty typical for Master Grade. Again, this kit isn't too crazy in terms of stuff it comes with. And, of course, you will also get this standard Master Grade style manual with the really nice box art there in full color, showing off kind of like a 3D render of the Hazel Custom here, flying through space, firing off the pretty unique looking beam rifle there with the standard shield equipped, no shield booster in sight. And then on the back here, you are going to get your decal marking guide. This being a P-Bandai Master Grade, this will of course be coming with water slide decals. In very typical kind of, I guess, UC Master Grade fashion, these water slide decals are going to be fairly minor, consisting of like Titan's test team logos, like I think it's like the White Rabbit logo there, as well as a few other logo decals, no covering it all up with a bunch of like warning or marking style decals, which is a nice change of pace. While those marking decals can add quite a bit, I find them pretty tedious to apply, and a lot of the time I don't like my designs that insanely busy. Of course, you're also going to get your color guide down here in full color in both English and Japanese. This is going to be a fairly simple color layout here, not too many colors, only 6 across the kit. Of course, getting into the manual, here you have your parts list, which looks pretty typical Master Grade, nothing too crazy. Of course, using a number of parts from the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0, there are going to be a number of extra parts left over in this kit. And of course, you get into your simplified build order here. Pretty typical. Start off with your chest and backpack, move on to your head, arms, legs, waist, and then all of your accessories there. And then getting right into the build. This will look pretty typical Master Grade-y. Again, heavily based on the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0. I haven't built it, but I've heard it's a pretty good kit, so I'm expecting this kit to also be similarly very solid. That's a very nice parts layering here, full cockpit gimmicks, all the usual stuff you would expect with a Master Grade. Moving on to the backpack here, this is going to contain your beam saber as well as a mounting point for the shield booster if you want to display your kit with it. Looks a little bit simple, but should do the job nicely. And then of course you move on to your head there, which looks pretty typical for a Gundam head, apart from the large sensor unit on the top of the head. And then moving on to your arms, again, very typical Master Grade-y, going to have your fully articulated hands there. Then you move on to your shoulders, and then you start building your legs, which does look very similar to ARC 782 2.0 build with the individual piston details on here. I am expecting you to need to use, yeah, there it is. You need to use your kind of shoelace-like material here to replicate the power piping details. Now, the only Mark II I've built is the real grade, and that kind of shoelace material that you use to wrap around the wire to replicate the power piping was a little bit annoying to work with. I am hoping it's a little bit easier to do in Master Grade, kind of similar to the Gundam F90s. That uses some of that shoelace material as power piping in like the feet and such, so I'm expecting this to not be that much of a pain to do for this kit. Of course, you get into the other leg. Of course, the main difference between this and like the Gundam Mk II is of course going to be that the Hazel Customs is a little bit bulked up because they're integrating like a bunch of experimental boosters and stuff all over the design of the mobile suit. Then move on to your waist, which looks a little bit simple for a Master Grade, but again, should do the job quite fine. Then you get into your accessories. So this is going to be, of course, the unique beam rifle for this kit. Unfortunately, looks like it's going to be two halves sandwiching together with some stuff in between. I really wish they would go for like full master grade styling for the weapon, similar to like the Jim's spray gun, where it's like there's an inner frame part and all these things layer on top of it. That really helps bulk it up nicely. It really helps the kit have something hefty to hold onto in the hand. I hope this doesn't have any kind of grip issues like the master grade Jim 2's beam rifle did for the Jim Cannon. And then you get into your shield. This is of course going to be the same shield that's used on a lot of kits like the Jim Sniper 2, the Jim Quell, etc. And then your shield booster, which I don't know if this is a typo or not because this is Boostor up here, but yeah, again, this is going to be also fairly simple because it's a shield with thruster in it, so it's not that crazy of an accessory. Then, of course, showing off holding the beam rifle, mounting the E-packs onto any of the hard points on the elbow or the waist, showing that you actually can mount the beam rifle to the side skirts, which is always nice. And then showing off the adapter for the either the shield booster or the standard shield to mount onto the arm. Then, of course, mounting the shield booster onto the backpack, showing off the beam saber, and then mounting onto an action base. Unfortunately, this is not going to have any kind of action base adapter in it to mount to your action base. You're going to need to use the fork, unfortunately, to have this kit in the air. And then, of course, showing off there's a hip swing mechanism to enhance articulation in some poses. So this looks pretty typical for a master grade, which, yeah, for a master grade to get back into the swing of things, because again, it's been a month since I built my last master grade, this is a pretty good option. So, getting to the contents of the bags. So inside the bags, you will get 17 runners, which sounds like a lot, but because of how small some of these runners are and all of the parts on the Gundam Mk II 2.0 runners that we aren't going to be using, this is pretty typical for a master grade. In addition, you will get this color-corrected sticker sheet containing your usual suspects, along with, unfortunately, some others. You will, of course, get metallic green and black stickers for your eye mask there, some green stickers for the sensors that are going to be on this kit and on the beam rifle, and then you will get a bunch of black squares here for the void details for the thrusters inside the legs, and you will get a yellow sticker here for the Federation V on the crotch. But hopefully the rest of this kit is color accurate apart from the parts covered by these stickers. And then, of course, you will get your water slide decal sheet here, a fairly small sheet, but containing mostly markings for the Titans test team. You will get some markings here for like the White Rabbit team or something like that. I'm pretty sure the Hazel custom in particular was used by the Black Otter team. So I'm not exactly sure why that logo isn't here, unless this is the logo. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not that familiar with Advance of Zeta. You also get this additional very large Titans testing logo for use on the standard shield. So pretty typical stuff. And then you will get your very long shoelace material here to put on some parts to mimic power piping. So you will have to cut this yourself, very typical fashion. So I'm not expecting this to be that big of a deal, but we'll see how it looks on the kit. So as for the runners themselves, so these runners are going to be printed in September of 2024 with runner PC-130 for a set of 1/100 scale polycaps, of course being based on the frame of the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0 from like, I think 2005. I'll throw the date up on screen if I'm wrong, but that was back when using polycaps and master grades was pretty normal, so they're going to be used here, and we will see how they fare with the bulkier design of the Hazel custom. Starting with runners A1 and A2 here being multicolored runners for the Hazel custom from 2017. This is going to be a multicolored runner with A1 coming in 3 different colors, A2 coming in 2. So of course you will get navy blue for the main accent part here, in that kind of like dark Titans blue here for parts for the feet and the torso, both the front and the back. You will get an off-white here for parts for the skirts, both the back skirts, the front skirts, the side skirts, the crotch, other parts for the feet, the lower torso and the front of the torso, etc. And you will get clear green here for parts for your head cameras, eyes, and the camera for the beam rifle. Runners B1 and B2 still from the Hazel custom for a bunch of accent parts in yellow for a number of vent details for the chest and the legs, etc. Runner C1 here still from the Hazel custom in a Titans navy blue for parts for your beam rifle here, and the navy blue parts for the shield booster and the standard shield. Runner D in off-white, still from the Hazel custom, going to be a number of parts for things like the backs of the hands, your seated pilot figure there, parts for the head, and the inner frame part of the shield. 2 of Runner E, still from the Hazel custom, for a number of armor parts for all across this kit, including some very large parts there for the very bulky legs. Runner F here in a navy tinted ABS from the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0 here, going to be a number of our frame parts for this kit, including the inner frame parts for things like the torso and waist. Runner G, still from 2005's Gundam Mk II 2.0, still in that same navy tinted gray for a number of additional inner frame parts here in ABS, including the parts with the, I guess, inner wiring things for the power piping that you need to cover up with the shoelace material that you saw earlier, as well as a number of like piston details for things like the feet. Runner H1 here in off-white from the Hazel custom, going to be the off-white parts for the shield booster. Runner H2 from the Hazel Custom, going to be all of the red parts in this kit, all 3 of them. You get an accent part for the head, a part for the cockpit hatch, and a part for the crotch with the Federation V in here, not part separated. Of course, you will be using the color correcting sticker you saw earlier. Runners I1 and I2 going to be in this navy tinted ABS, this time unique for the Hazel Custom, going to be all of the frame parts that we're not going to be using from the Mark II's frame. You see parts for the torso for like the cockpit and things like that. You see inner parts for the skirts, the legs, etc. Runner K here from the Gundam Mark II 2.0, going to be a number of parts in that navy gray ABS, for mainly parts for the hands that I believe we're going to be using in this kit. And of course, last but not least, we will be getting Runner SB1 here for a set of standard 1/100 scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink for the one beam saber that this kit has. So all in all, not that crazy of a kit, but I am expecting it to be pretty nice being based on the Gundam Mark II 2.0, so I will be seeing you after the build. All right, welcome back. Here's the Master Grade Gundam TR-1 Hazel Custom. I'm just going to be calling it the Hazel Custom from now on. Snap built, panel lined, decaled up with the included water slide decals, and top coated with Mr. Hobby Premium Flat Top Coat. And I'll just say it very quickly now in case anyone notices it very quickly. But there's 2 things. First off, I kind of messed up while top coating this. The fork that I have for the action base, because this doesn't come with an action base adapter, is rather loose on this kit because of the rather wide taint that this kit has. So it did fall off the stick after I finished top coating it. So if you notice any chips in it or any like scratches on the top coat or anything like that, that's what happened. Secondly, you may notice one part is a little bit different on this kit. It is the thumb on the left hand. So while I was putting the fingers onto the alligator clips to kind of paint the tips red, the thumb rocketed off somewhere because the alligator clip slipped and I have no idea where it went and I couldn't find it. So I stole the thumb off of the Master Grade Zeta Plus that I have because I'm keeping it permanently transformed into Wave Rider mode, so it doesn't really need its hands. So I took its thumb and gave it to this kit. So the left thumb is going to be proportionally much smaller than the right thumb, so that's what happened there. So anyway, getting right into the build, this is pretty typical as far as like slightly older Master Grade builds go. The inner frame is of course going to be entirely ABS, being based on the, I think, 2005's Master Grade Gundam Mark II 2.0 build, and in my opinion, I think the frame's a little worse than the Master Grade ARC 78-2 2.0 frame or the Master Grade Jim 2.0 frame, but it's still perfectly serviceable. A lot of the annoyance, in my opinion, comes from the, I guess, shoelace type material that they're using to replicate the power piping. So in this kit, you place it onto an ABS plastic, I guess, frame piece that's supposed to replicate a wire or something. That part is fine. Then you need to tuck it into a little like receptor piece, and that gets a little bit annoying. It was a little bit hard to kind of squeeze it into the receptor without it fraying. A very similar problem to the real grade Gundam Mark II. So a solution I had heard about that is if you hold the tip of the shoelace material up to like a lighter or something, it will prevent the wire from fraying a little bit. I did not do that, so mine frayed, so that's a little bit annoying. But in general, the frame is pretty solid. It does its job well, and because this mobile suit isn't particularly over the top, it is very blocky and chunky, but it doesn't have anything super insane on it. So the frame does a perfectly serviceable job of holding together and being stable. In terms of the armor pieces adding on, again, there's not really much to say. There's a lot of parts layering on this kit, particularly in the kind of crotch area and on the legs. The legs in particular are a standout for how nicely everything layers on and how just kind of cool it is to see the construction process of them. It really is emblematic of the Master Grade line in general, where you see all the parts layering together and you see like the construction of how the mobile suit might have looked if it existed in real life. The fully complete inner frame, all the parts layering on top of it, the frame poking through the various layering parts like these vents on the sides of the legs, all of it builds together super nicely and holds together great. There was a bit of an issue on my kit. I don't know exactly how it happened. I don't know if I, in like a fugue state, I filed it off or something, or if it was just an error on the runner, didn't come molded in, based on the lack of the signature, I guess, like darkening that happens on a part of a kit that you kind of file down an extension into. I think one of my frame pieces did not come with the peg on it. So on the back rear of the kind of lower leg of the kit, there's an armor piece that needs 2 pegs to slot into. One of the legs only had 1 peg, so that part's a little bit loose. So I don't know if that was a manufacturing error or a build error on my part, because I did the cleanup for this kit in a bit of a rush because I was about to go on a small vacation, so I tried to get it done very quickly. So I don't exactly remember what happened there, but that's just something to point out if a part of the armor seems a little bit loose in future parts of the video. So the build is quite good for this kit, and even though it's heavily reliant on polycaps, again, that older Gundam Mark II frame is going to be ABS and use polycaps. It feels quite dated, but it does the job fine. I did not really feel like the polycap parts were any kind of issue on this kit. Nothing felt loose or floppy or anything like that. So getting into aesthetics then, this kit is very interesting in terms of aesthetics. Before I get into my opinion on the design itself, let's of course talk about color accuracy. So getting into the color correcting stickers very quickly, as As you can see, I did use all of them. A lot of them are what you would expect them to be, being metallic detail parts, but some of them are a little bit odd, so we'll get into them really quickly. Sticker 1 is, of course, going to be the very typical eye sticker here, this very mean, thin glare. I'm not exactly sure if Kotoku is the one who did the designing for these kits, but given how leggy this design is and how like kind of stocky the torso is and how mean the glare is, it really does feel like a Kotoku design if it wasn't him. But of course, that eye sticker is going to be a sticker. Sticker 2 you get 8 of. They're going to be the black squares to fill in these like void details for the thrusters in the legs, and of course there are a ton of them. Yeah, so that part is going to be a little bit loose. It was only loose after top coating, so I think it's a bit of a fit issue caused by the top coat kind of thickening up the peg a little bit, so I don't really consider that a build issue because it wasn't a problem beforehand. Sticker 3 is going to be the very large metallic green camera sticker here on the backpack. Stickers 4 and 5 are going to be camera stickers on the front of the torso and the front of the backpack there. I don't know how you can see that. Sticker 6 you get 2 of for the green metallic stickers there on the lower legs. And sticker 7 is going to be a yellow fold-over sticker for the V in the crotch. Of all of the color-correcting sticker parts, that's definitely the one I would recommend you paint in. It doesn't really look the greatest. In kind of the middle of the V, it looks fine. I did have to pinch it together with tweezers, but as you can see on the kind of edges of the V there, you can see like the stickers peeling up a little bit, and it doesn't really look all that great. Now for the parts of this kit that are not given color correcting stickers and are not color accurate, and oh boy is there a lot of very small detail painting you are going to need to do to this kit. So we're going to go top down for this kit. So starting with the head, the only real color inaccuracy, apart from the kind of intakes here or the ventilation parts that need to be shaded in black, I don't really count that. That's a part that a lot of, especially slightly older master grades, you would need to shade in. A lot of newer ones do have part separation for that, but for an older master grade or a kit based on an older master grade, I don't really fault it, like for needing to shade in these parts on the front and on the side of the head there, and in the sides of this head crest here. But of course, the thing that's not color accurate is going to be these bars breaking up the very large clear green camera piece on the top of the head. If you want this to pop out a little bit more, you could paint the white part underneath the clear green in like a silver or something like that, but it may be hard to get like the brush or the marker into with all these bars kind of breaking it up. But the bars are all supposed to be in yellow. I used a dark yellow Gundam marker from the MSV Gundam marker set, so that was a little bit annoying to do, but it turned out okay. In the chest then, the only real color inaccuracy that isn't covered by color correcting stickers is going to be this hinge, or I think this is supposed to be a hinge here for the cockpit hatch. His part is supposed to be in the same gray as the frame. We'll talk about the frame in a moment, that for color accuracy, but I just use seed gray for that part. On the backpack, there are 2 big ones. This bar here needs to be in the same gray as the frame. Again, I just use seed gray. And the insides of the thrusters need to be yellow. I used a new white undercoat and then dark yellow for the actual main yellow of the thrusters. In the arms then, the only real color inaccuracy is kind of the big one that I would recommend people paint on this kit. All the others were kind of small details that you could like kind of not really notice if they aren't accurate, but it's of course going to be the tips of the fingers that need to be in red here. Of course, they come in the same gray as the rest of the hand because these are from the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0. So the tips need to be painted in red. I used a new white undercoat and then a standard Gundam red for the shade of red. Didn't turn out all that great. I don't know why it's so splotchy. I don't know what happened. It didn't really have that kind of an issue when I used it in other kits, but on this one it tended to be a little bit splotchier. In the waist then, there are 2 color inaccuracies. Of course, there's going to be a similarly to the torso, this kind of bolt here needs to be in gray, so I use seed gray for that. Same thing for this bolt here on the rear skirt, that needs to be in gray. In the legs then, it's really just a lot of, I guess, like void details that need to be filled in, like on the sides of the legs and such. But apart from that, there aren't really any color inaccuracies on the legs, which is quite nice. However, then we get into the accessories. Now, the big part with the color inaccuracies is going to be the shield booster, unfortunately, given that this is like kind of the big unique accessory that this kit gets. So as you can see here, all of these little sub bolts on the front need to be painted in red. I just use standard Gundam red. These larger bolts need to be in the same gray as the frame, so I use seed gray for that. On the back here, the bolts are supposed to be like kind of poking through everything, so they need to be in red as well. And the part that I didn't do, this part here, this rail that this adapter is supposed to be able to slide on but isn't because this is just one big piece, needs to be in the same gray as the frame, and this square here needs to be in yellow. This bar here also needs to be in yellow. I did paint that over. So in general, there are a ton of color inaccuracies in this kit, and that's not even touching on kind of the huge one in my opinion, which is the frame itself. So I'll throw it up on screen now, but this is the image from the P-Bandai listing for this kit, and as you can see, the frame is very much the purple tinted gray that we've seen on other kits, like the high grade D Gundam First, or the RE100 Gun Cannon Detector, or I think even the FM Raider had this kind of purple tinted gray that I've taken a look at on this channel. Take a look at those videos if you haven't. But this kit, as you can see here, the frame is noticeably just primer gray. There's no purple on it, so it is not accurate. So you will need to repaint the entire frame in that purple tinted gray if you want it to be color accurate, which is a bit annoying. So in general, color accuracy on this kit is a little bit odd, and it's even more odd if you consider like kind of the different versions of this kit that have appeared in art throughout the years. Like, I'll throw it up on screen now from the Gundam Wiki. I think this is from like the Advance of Zeta, like Flag of the Titans or whatever it's called, but that version of this kit has a ton of little red accent parts everywhere. So if you wanted to match that kit, there's even more detail painting you're going to have to do, with a ton of parts needing to be painted in red, like those little slits in the shoulders and parts on the spare magazines on the side skirts and things like that. All of that has the geometric detail that needs to be painted, but in the painted build on the P-Bandai website and on the back of the manual that I use as a reference, they don't have those painted, so I don't really consider that to be color inaccurate. Again, it really depends on what version of this kit you want to make, the kind of official painted build that's seen on the P-Bandai website and on the manual, or the version seen in Flag of the Titans. But apart from that, I do really love this design. I love the Gundam Mk II. Of the kind of classic protagonist Gundams from UC, the Gundam Mk II is my favorite. I just love how it looks, and this carries over a lot of that, of course, sharing its frame. It's very blocky, it almost feels a little bit stocky despite being the same height as a standard Gundam, and it's really enhanced with all of the parts that make the Hazel custom unique. Of course, you have these giant booster parts in the legs, you have this protruding part in the chest and the crotch and the backpack. It's all super big, blocky, and chunky, and I absolutely love it. I love this really kind of like clunky prototype thing where they're basically bolting boosters and stuff to it. So I really do love this design. The color scheme is great, with the off-white being the main color. You have a Titan's blue kind of accent part, and then an orange yellow, making up a tertiary color, a secondary accent color. So all of it looks great in my opinion, although it is a shame that so much of it is color inaccurate and needs to be painted in yourself, which is a bit of a shame. There's going to be plenty of detail painting you're going to have to do to this kit in order to make it color accurate. Apart from that, aesthetically, I absolutely adore this kit, which may influence my recommendation at the end of this video. I am pretty biased here. So for a quick size comparison, here is the Master Grade Gundam TR-1 Hazel Custom next to a standard size high grade being the High Grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a standard size Master Grade being the Master Grade Gym Sniper 2 White Dingo Team. So as you can see, the Gundam TR-1 here stands a little bit taller than a standard size Master Grade. Of course, a lot of the extra height is going to come from the very leggy proportions of this kit, and especially given how thick the leg parts are, that adds a bit of height to this kit. So in terms of head height, it is going to be maybe like half an inch or so taller than your standard Master Grade. That is going to expand greatly if you have this kit in the air, as its design is kind of want to do, and of course it's going to take up a lot more vertical space if you mount the shield booster onto the backpack, which we'll talk about in a moment. In terms of accessories, here is the Master Grade Hazel Custom with everything it comes with. Starting as usual with our hand options, this is of course going to use the old school fully articulated hands with a tab in the middle for holding weapons. These will have a point of articulation at the base, being ball joints. No point of articulation in the middle. They are molded in a permanently kind of curved stance, which can be a bit awkward in certain poses. They're definitely not the greatest. If you're going to have fully articulated hands, I prefer the ones with a second joint in the middle so you can do any kind of pose. In terms of your adapters, the only adapter you will get is going to be this adapter for the shield. So this will just plug into the back of the arm, and you can have the shield on either the side or the back of the arm. Unfortunately, you don't get an action-based adapter, so if you want to use an adapter, you will need a fork. Now, unfortunately, this fork, which is a pretty standard fork as far as I'm aware, doesn't really fit this kit, because as you can see, the bottom of this kit where the fork would mount is extremely wide. You can see it's very, very wide, so you will need a different adapter for this kit. I think specifically it calls for the BA3 runner for the fork that works with this kit. In terms of your main melee weapon, you will of course have this beam saber, which will mount in the backpack when not in use. It is a bit loose in there, which is why I have it out right now. I didn't want it kind of falling out of this kit every time I was handling it, but it is a typical beam saber, not really much to say. It will tap into the hand like so, and you will use this very standard beam saber effect part with the beam saber. Again, not really much to say. We've seen this a million times in other Master Grades. In terms of your main ranged weapon, you will of course get the signature beam rifle of the Hazel Custom here. It is rather short, so despite having a secondary handle, I don't really see a world where you would want to use the secondary handle, given how kind of awkward it would be to hold on to with how small this weapon is, but you'll of course have a secondary handle that can swing out when in use. This is going to be very high grading in terms of construction, so you have two halves of sandwiched together with this kind of nasty seam line running down the middle of the rifle there, which does mean that the magazine is not removable, or the e-pack or whatever. Even though you have spares mounted on the side of the kit, you cannot actually take this off itself. And of course the scope for the beam rifle will be able to pop out like so. When in use, there's a clear green part in there. doesn't really stand out all that much given how dark the part is behind it, so you may want to paint the back of this piece here in chrome so you have the light kind of reflecting through this clear green piece, because as it is right now, it's not very impressive in terms of standing out. In terms of your standard shield, you will of course with this very nice kind of Titans test team logo there on the front. The manual says you can't cut this part of the R there and have the kind of flat edge be flush with the top of this navy blue part, but I just decided to use the full decal. Here is the standard shield. We've seen this shield design in a ton of other mobile suits like the Jim Quell, I think the Jim Custom has one, the Jim Cannon, the Jim Sniper 2. Anyway, this shield is seen in plenty of other places. The only point of articulation is this part that clips into the adapter, can rotate, so you can rotate the shield as you want. Apart from that, not really much to say. It is a pretty basic shield. And then you get the one like super unique accessory for this kit, the shield booster. So this is of course going to, in lore, this has like a big propellant tank underneath this Titan's blue part, and you have a big thruster in here to kind of propel the unit. Because of all the extra armor, it is a bit heavier, so it does have this extra thruster here to give it extra mobility, and it does look pretty cool. I do really like it mounted as a thruster unit. As a shield unit, I think it's like all right. I don't think it's anything super special, especially with the inside not being color separated. It doesn't look all that great. The only real point of articulation in it, of course, besides being able to rotate the adapter, same thing as the standard shield, is this peg being able to flip out and mount onto this point here in the backpack. So if you kind of pull the backpack out and mount it in, you can have it mounted like so and have like a big extra thruster on the back of the Hazel Custom, which definitely gives it a very unique silhouette and looks very cool in the air, so you'll see that more in the posing section. So yeah, a fairly basic accessory spread for the Hazel Custom, which makes sense because it's kind of like the base unit that you can mount a bunch of different accessories onto, like the Herdudu or the Primrose or the extra shield booster set. But the accessory spread does its job and is perfectly serviceable, especially if you just want to display the Hazel Custom just by itself, unmodified. So getting into articulation now, because most of the frame is basically unchanged from the Master Grade Gundam Mk II 2.0, I imagine a lot of the articulation is going to be pretty similar to that kit. So that's just to give you an idea of what to expect if you have that kit. Starting with the head, of course. For an upward look, you can get a decent upward stare. For a downward look, it can look into its own chest. You get some minor side to side, but nothing too crazy before the head will collide with this raised collar part here. And of course, the head can 360 about the ball joint. Just be careful because, again, similar to some other kits I've looked at in the past, the chin will scrape against these parts on the sides of the chest, so that may damage the top coat finish if you top coat this kit, which you should because it comes with water slides. In the shoulders then, for a shoulder swing, you get a pretty minor shoulder swing because of how thick the shoulder armor is before it collides with the rather wide, blocky torso. You get a very minor rearward swing, but again, nothing really to write home about. The shoulder can articulate independently of the arm, which allows for just over a 90-degree side raise. These flaps are just molded together as part of this kind of block in the shoulder so that does not articulate. You will of course get full 360 rotation in the upper bicep as per usual. An armor slide gimmick in the elbow. As you can see, this panel here will stay still, so when you bend the elbow, it vanishes, and the double bend in the elbow allows for a nearly 180-degree bend. The wrist is on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things, in addition to a hinge, which will allow the wrist to go 90 degrees to either side, which is really, really cool and allows for a lot of very interesting poses. If you saw the community post I made where I said this video may or may not be delayed by a day or two, I had the Hazel Custom doing a kind of relaxed pose chilling on top of the Duel Blitz's box with the hand kind of 90 degrees to one side, and it looks really cool. As I mentioned earlier, the fingers are going to be on ball joints, with the hand being split into thumb, index finger, and remaining 3 fingers together. So that will allow for pretty natural weapon holding poses and some interesting expressive poses, but it does not allow for any kind of closed fists. In the torso then, for ab crunch, as you can see with this extremely blocky design, you will get basically next to no forward ab crunch. Or backwards crunch, you will get a okay backwards crunch, nothing too crazy. And for side to side, you will get an okay side to side tilt. And of course you can 360 the torso about the peg in the waist. Just be careful because it will collide and bump into things. For auxiliary articulation, of course, the cockpit hatch can open. This top part will slide out and lift up, and the bottom part here will open up. It is a little bit hard to get to once the torso is mounted onto the waist. And inside there, you have your sitting pilot figure. I don't know how well you can see, he is very recessed in there. Unfortunately, you don't get any kind of standing pilot figure for scale, but you do get a sitting generic Federation pilot figure. And in addition, you have these, the wiki calls them support actuators. I don't exactly know what they're for. I think the wiki says they are to enhance the articulation and motion of the shoulders themselves, but in model kit form, you can let me know in the comments what these do, if anything, because as it is, as I understand it, they can just pop out like so. I don't know exactly what they can do, but they just pop out like this. In the backpack then, The thrusters are going to be on ball joints, which will do ball joint things. In addition, the support unit for where the shield booster will mount can kind of swing out like so, and then it can tilt around to show the Hazel custom kind of boosting around at any angle, which is cool, and you'll see that in the posing section. It is on a bit of a rail, but it is a bit stiff after top coating. In the waist then, the front skirts are going to be in separate ball joints, which will allow for a 180-degree raise. There is some nice detail on the underside, but it is not part or color separated, so you may want to paint that in if it bothers you. The side skirts will tilt up about 60 degrees, and the back skirt is going to be fixed in place. There is a hip swing mechanism where the legs can swing forward like so for better, more natural posing. As I don't know how we can see that, but there's a bit of a track in there for the legs to kind of rotate about. They do kind of lock vertically down, but as you move the leg forward, it will swing naturally. For forward kicks then, with the leg swing, you can get about 90 degrees, but as you can see, the leg being quite heavy will want to pivot the whole thing downwards. For a side raise, you can get up a little under 90 degrees, but because again of how heavy the leg is, where it will sit on its own is about 45 degrees. And for rear kicks, you will get maybe 15 degrees. It is incredibly minor. You will get full rotation in the upper thigh. Just be careful because it may pop the connector for the waist into the leg out a little bit. In the knee, there is an armor separation and armor slide gimmick. So as you bend the knee, you can see this thigh piece will separate, and it reveals a piece of inner armor here covering the frame. And of course, because of how large the legs are, it will struggle a bit to get a full bend, but you can get over 90 degrees of bend, which is quite impressive. The ankle armor can rotate up and down, but you are very limited by the leg armor here. In the feet then, for foot dips, you can get over 45 degrees downward, exposing this very nice moving piston details as you articulate the feet. For an upward raise, you can get a pretty decent upward raise, although the ankle armor does obstruct it a little bit. But the toe separation does allow you to dip the toe a little bit independently of the heel, although it's not anything super significant. For side tilts, you will get some minor side to side tilt, and for foot pivot, you can get a little bit under 45 degrees before the pistons will want to yank themselves out of their sockets, which you definitely don't want to happen. So overall, articulation for the Hazel Custom is surprisingly good given the rather chunky proportions of this kit, but it is still rather limited by those chunky proportions, specifically in these things like the shoulders and in parts of the leg articulation. But it looks quite good, especially with all the armor side gimmicks in the elbows and knees. So let's see the articulation in action in some poses. So getting the Hazel Custom into the usual running and gunning pose. First off, just getting out of the way now before anyone brings it up, I forgot to put the beam saber in the backpack for a couple of poses, so you may notice that it is missing in some of these poses. I just forgot about it because I had it out because, as I mentioned earlier, it does tend to fall out very easily while you're handling the kit, so I just had it off for convenience's sake. Anyway, getting right into it now very quickly. Of course, this kit does handle running and gunning quite well. As you can see by the very large surface area of the feet, it has no problem kind of balancing, and while this kit is quite bulky and chunky in general, the weight isn't distributed in a very unbalanced or crazy way, so it is capable of holding this running and gunning pose quite easily. However, do note that the hips are slightly loose. I did notice that the legs wanted to swing back and forth a little bit. Now, I think that might have been, I don't know if that was an issue caused by the damage when I dropped this kit from about 4 feet onto tile when I was top coating it, like I mentioned earlier, or if it's just an inherent design flaw of the Mark II's frame. I did remember people complaining a little bit about the hips of the Mark II. Apart from, I don't think it had anything to do with looseness, but once you have the kit solidly on the ground, the looseness stops being an issue. It doesn't really hold on. What does become an issue are the shoulders. I don't exactly know what it is, but when you rotate the arm, it sometimes desyncs with the shoulder, and it will wedge into the shoulder and kind of explode it apart. There were numerous times when I was trying to rotate the arm to look natural where it would wedge the shoulder off and it would just fall to the floor and I'd have to find it and reassemble it again. Now, that shoulder desync does seem to be a design issue. I didn't notice anything that was actually kind of like pinning the shoulder to the arm that would cause them to rotate in sync. So I think that's just an issue with this kit in general, so that's just something to keep in mind while you pose this kit. Any kind of arm rotation does pose a risk of having the shoulder go flying. Apart from that, I do think the kit looks quite good in this running and gunning pose, although this design is very conducive to space fair and aerial poses, so I really don't think that I would pose this kit doing this kind of pose. Even though it looks good doing it, it can do it quite easily, and the beam rifle does look really good in this quick, nimble pose, emphasizing its small size and ease of handling. All that are positive points for this kit in my opinion, and while the kit can handle it quite well, and you can pose it on this shelf doing this in a diorama and have it look good, isn't really something I would consider having this kit do on my shelf. So, of course, to cover all my bases, here's the kit crouched, firing the beam rifle two-handed through the little gap in the standard shield it has, which I think is really cool, the way that you can use the shield like this in a very practical way, making use of the contours of it to effectively protect the arm and the torso, while also effectively opening fire on your opponent through that little gap in the bottom. In addition, I have the support actuators articulated here. Again, don't know exactly how you're supposed to use those actuators, articulators, whatever they're called, in posing, because they don't really do anything. They're just an extra interesting bit of geometric detail on this kit. But in this kind of crouching pose here, I also really wouldn't want to do this on my shelf as well. It was a little bit difficult to get this kit crouched and balanced kind of well. I did have to spin the back leg to the side a little bit, which doesn't look all that natural, and the torso is very much tilted. It was hard to kind of level the legs out properly because the hip swing is for both legs and not individual, so it is kind of hard to level the kit out in this kind of way. In addition, the rather limited knee bend does mean that, again, that also compounds onto the issue of having trouble leveling the legs. The beam rifle here also looks pretty bad in a two-handed pose. Again, like I mentioned in the running and gunning pose, it does look a lot better when you're emphasizing the nimbleness and the agility of the weapon, rather than this kind of pose, which would emphasize the power of it. It was also rather difficult to get the offhand to grip onto the secondary handle because of the aforementioned shoulder issues I mentioned earlier. The shoulders just kept desyncing and popping off and just kind of flying everywhere, and it was very hard to get it to even grip this in the first place, which was compounded even further by the rather poor shoulder swing of this kit, as noted in the articulation section. So while I really like some ideas of this kind of pose, where you're using the contours of the shield strategically to protect the mobile suit while also opening fire on your opponent, a lot of other things just don't work for this kit in this kind of pose, where I really wouldn't consider doing this on the shelf. So of course, getting the kit into the air, charging forward with the shield booster mounted onto the back, and the kind of beam rifle firing a little bit through the contour of the shield, but not as extreme as I would like it to be because of the limited shoulder swing for the shield, and here it is kind of dashing through the air on the fork. So this pose kind of shows off what this kit does well and shows off some of the weaknesses of this kit. Now, what this kit does well is it just looks good in the air. This kit's entire design is very much intended for space combat, and it really does show. It looks a lot more natural in the air, where you're not limited by needing to kind of balance this kit on the ground. The shield booster itself also makes way more sense mounted on the back there in space rather than on the ground. So, and I really think that does kind of fill out the silhouette of this kit and extend it in a way that makes it a lot more unique and make it feel more complete, which I really do like. However, there are some issues with this kit that make posing it feel a little bit unnatural. One of the legs. As you saw in the articulation section, because of how heavy the legs are, they don't really tend to sit in the angles you would want it to for extreme movement and things like that. So a lot of the movement feels kind of half-hearted or lackadaisical, and it really just doesn't feel like the mobile suit's putting all of its energy into kind of charging forward or whatever. In addition, like I mentioned at the beginning of this pose, the limited shoulder swing in the shield really means that it is very hard to convey that this kit is attempting to protect itself with the shield. Again, it feels very half-hearted, it's not fully extending the shield in front of itself, and it looks pretty unnatural. And in this kind of sustained motion pose, with the beam rifle kind of tucked by its side doing a hip fire pose, again, doesn't really look all that great. You do want the arm kind of at a full extension to play out, and again, to emphasize the, I guess, smallness of the beam rifle in comparison with the mobile suit's body, in a full extension kind of aiming off to the side pose rather than this close to the chest kind of concentrated center fire pose. So in general, I would maybe consider a modified version of something like this on the shelf. I really would consider something like the box art pose that you're going to see in the conclusion section to pose on the shelf. So getting this kit into a quick melee pose with the beam saber while I get into the conclusion here. Again, not really much to talk about. It is a beam saber after all. In conclusion, the Master Grade Hazel Custom is an interesting kit. It's a design that I love, which makes it more of a shame that this kit is so kind of flawed in many ways, but whether or not that's a deal breaker is up to you to decide. But for the build, this kit is fairly solid. It is a polycap build, being based on a 2005 frame. The polycaps do their jobs quite nicely in general, with the only real issue for the polycaps going to be in the hips. Because of how heavy the legs are, they do not tend to hold poses very well and will droop a little bit. That is the only spot where the polycaps feel a little bit weak, and it's only really an issue in kind of extreme dynamic aerial poses. In many other poses, the polycaps are a non-issue. The armor layers on quite nicely, and there were no fit issues as far as I noticed. There's a ton of parts layering, there's a ton of color separation all across this kit that make the build quite enjoyable in general. The only real thing that was a bit of a pain were the power piping of the backs of the legs, but again, do the trick where you use a lighter to slightly singe the tips of the shoelace material where you cut it so that it doesn't really fray as you jam it into the receptor piece and the backs of the knees. In terms of aesthetics then, this is where this kit kind of falls apart a little bit. Geometrically, of course, as with pretty much every Master Grade, it is essentially perfect. In terms of sculpt, it is a perfect representation of the Hazel Custom. It looks great. I love the proportions of this kit. I love how kind of blocky and chunky and prototypey everything looks, because they're essentially bolting all of these thrusters onto this prototype for the Gundam Mark II, among other things. Where this kit really falls apart in the aesthetics department is of course going to be in terms of color accuracy. Besides the color correcting stickers included with this kit, there's an absolute ton of small detail painting you are going to have to do to get this kit color accurate. Tons of details for things like the bars in the head, the dots where the kind of bolts are supposed to be on the shield booster, the entire back of the shield booster where the frame is supposed to be. There's just a ton of small details like that that need to be painted in and are really quite annoying to do, and especially if you're a stickler for color accuracy and you're a kind of color accuracy purist, what's really going to be a kind of deal breaker for this kit for you, if you don't really feel like you have the time to put in the effort to do a very like in-depth, involved painted build of this kit without even touching the exterior armor, is of course going to be the inner frame. The inner frame is entirely color inaccurate. It needs to be in a much more purple tinted gray rather than the slight navy tinted gray that this kit comes with. So the frame being color inaccurate and all of the parts on the outside not being color accurate that also need to be painted in that similar gray where the frame is supposed to be poking through is would kind of be a deal breaker if you're a color accuracy purist. For a lot of other people, I think you can get away with not painting the frame. I think the primer gray with the slight navy tint looks okay on this kit. It's really just a small detail painting that you're going to want to do, especially the fingertips needing to be in red. That's definitely, if you're going to paint any one detail on this kit, that would be the one. It's the most noticeable, and it really helps the kit appear a little bit more striking in a lot of these poses. In terms of accessories then, this kit comes with most of what you would expect it to: sword, board, beam rifle, and shield booster. The only things I would say are missing are one, a standing pilot figure, but with that being an omission from many P-Bandai Master Grades, I don't really consider it that much of a down point for this kit. It's just a little bit annoying that you don't have something to convey the scale of the mobile suit. The real big issue, in my opinion, that this kit is missing, because it is based on the Gundam Mark II 2.0, is going to be an action base adapter. Needing to rely on the fork to get this on an action base is very annoying, and as you can see, the fork that comes common in a lot of like third-party bases and things like that are too narrow for the very wide base of this kit. The kit recommends a very specific fork adapter from runner BA3, and I don't have that, so it is a little bit awkward, and the kit did want to tip over a little bit on the air if you don't have the properly sized fork, which does feel a little bit incomplete in my opinion. In terms of articulation, this kit also struggles quite a bit here, with the lack of shoulder swing, lack of ab crunch, and the very heavy legs kind of tending to droop and not really allowing you to get the full range of articulation that this design should allow in the legs, meaning that your posing is going to be a little bit of a mess. On the ground it can look natural, but is not conducive to what this design really wants to do, which is be in the air, and in the air the legs want to droop, and your aiming is going to be a little bit unnatural in certain ways, with the way the arm desyncs with the shoulder, causing it to pop off, and the shoulder swing being rather minimal in general, leading to plenty of issues in posing. Although once you get it into a pose that works, it does look quite impressive and cool, and I think it just might be because I love the design that I'm giving it positive marks in this kind of regard. So would I recommend this kit? It depends on how much you like the design. If this design isn't for you, then I could say you could comfortably pass on this kit and say you're not missing out on much. If you love the design but are a color accuracy purist and don't necessarily have the time to fully repaint the frame, I would also say skip out on this kit. I don't know exactly how color accurate the other Hazel Master Grades are. We'll take a look at that in future videos. Make sure to sub if you don't want to miss those. But if you don't mind the color inaccurate frame and don't mind spending the time to do a little bit of detail painting for the small details across this kit, I really do think this kit is really a really interesting addition to have on the shelf. It is quite unique in its silhouette, and like a lot of AOZ kits, again, it's aesthetically quite unique, and I think you can make a very interesting like full set with this and the other Hazel Master Grades. So I tentatively recommend this kit if you like the design. Otherwise, I would say you could comfortably skip out on this. If you were to buy any one AOZ Master Grade, I don't think this would be it. The other two, I think, provide much more interesting and complete options for your money. So that was my review of the Master Grade Gundam TR-1 Hazel Custom. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like videos like these, make sure to sub and hit notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with my review of the high grade Duel Blitz Gundam. I'll see you then.